Yes, greetings. Welcome to this fifth episode about Ableton stock plugins. This is the fifth episode, and this will be the last, I guess, for the Ableton Audio Effect stock plugin. So, a bit of auto promotion. You can find some interesting content if you are an Ableton user or even other DAW user. You can go check our Patreon page called Patreon/Shieldrum Records, and you will find some content and some link to some reward, generally fruit of several tutorials made along the years on this channel. So you can find some effects, some effects racks, instrument racks, and some concept also shared there. Okay, and for those who are not up to subscribe, you can also find my instruments on a shop called Gumroad. So you go on Gumroad, GDI Elements, and you will find some different things. Also, there are some drum rack, instrument, bass, effects, brief, everything built in Ableton to make some dub. Okay, so the last time in episode 4 we left this list at reverb, so let's check this reverb. Okay, here I have a preset of a bright room. So let's put some music in. Okay, let's go. Okay, so quite simple. At the input, what can I say before all that? Yes, this reverb is quite good quality, and this should be the one you use when you don't need a special reverb, because you already can do a lot with this, and at its algorithm reverb, it will take less CPU than everything else. So it's less like go-to parameter like the Valhalla verb, for example. But yeah, when you decoded everything that happened on this faceplate, you will be able to sculpt any reverb you want. So at the input, we got the low cut, high cut, and pre-delay. So let's just solo that, and I'm sending all of the drum in it, and let's try it without the filter. Okay, I can even send the bass. So I can remove all the lows from the reverb or the highs. Okay, the low, you will remove them to remove the sub. Here I do an exaggeration by sending kick and bass into the reverb, but it's just to show you the efficiency of that input filter. With that filter, it would be pretty invasive. Okay, so let's go back on the reverb. After this, we have the early reflection section. So early reflection in the reverb are the very first sound of the reverb. The first band on the walls. We can add that spin function. So this is a modulation on the early reflection. And you have the amount and the rate of that modulation. So you can hear the effect of the modulation on the bass sound. Okay, and the shape, I suppose, sculpt the provenance of early reflection. Okay, with small decay, with small value, the early reflection merge best with the rest of the reverb, because this is the first part. We have the early reflection and then the late reflection also. Okay, let's continue above. We have the diffusion network. So post reverb, this is a kind of EQ which will dump all the high frequency or the low frequencies at the output. Let's bypass the input filter to see the effect of that post filter. Okay, so after it, we have a chorus. So this is chorus modulating the output of the reverb. It's different than this spinning of the early reflections. I would say I would add chorus on if I have to make insert reverb on pads, for example, or melodic instruments. Okay, and at the bottom we have the settings, more general setting like pre-delay. We can go up to 250. We have the size. Which is different than the decay. The size will change the shape of the room, in fact. I guess small room, small shaped room, and big room. Rare it because the reverb is more diffuse when it's at its maximum. So the more you want a dense reverb with a lot of density, the more you will choose from small to medium with a long decay. Let's try big size and big decay. As you can hear, it's more diffuse, like in a stadium, big room. So for some sharp reverb near to the plate, you have spring verb with the springs, you have the plate verb with the metal plate, and you have the room verb which are emulation of room. Okay, so in terms of size, I would say for a plate emulation, this would be in the first half of this knob. Okay. Okay, after that we have a freeze section, so meaning that we can freeze the reverb. This can be good for some dub effect or also to tune the reverb. This idea would work if we put another equalizer after it. Because it seems when it freezes also all the machine. We can't modify some EQ or things like that. So let's try again and EQ it with an EQ8 after it. Okay, and to finish on that flat and cut, let's see what's it. For flat, this bypass the diffusion network filter when freeze is enabled. Okay. So this will bypass all this filter when freeze is enabled. And cut. This modifies freeze by preventing the input signal from adding to the frozen reverberation. When off, the input signal will contribute to the diffuse amplitude. Okay, so when it is cut and you freeze, it will capture a loop of reverb. But if cut is not engaged, it will still take some input signal if it receives some input signal. Okay, after it, we have the stereo, either, let's say. So it's true that we set some reverb generally to mimic some space, and we tend to always use them in stereo. But there's several cases where mono reverb is very important, because that way you will have a different result for short verb, for example, when you want to give some density to a snare or even to everything in your mix. Okay, if you set a stereo, you will have a room emulation in 3D or 2D or 3D. But if you set it on mono, it will be, the reverb will be like an extension of the input signal, okay, with no difference between left and right. So you can tailor pretty short reverb to add some thickness to any sound. Let's try to do it on this whole drum bus, just for the test. The smooth is to smooth transition between different sizes. Okay, I didn't explain earlier. If we put to none, it will jump from value to value. And slow will make this slower for some special effect too. So this is an example of using it in mono, of course, even in some long verb or things like that. Everything will work. Okay, so let's set it back to some room verb. And to finish, we have the level of the early reflection, the level of kind of the second verb, the diffusion, and the dry wet. Here we stay 100% wet because I set it on a return track. So those two knobs are great also if you want to tune, for example, your early reflection by cutting the other long reverb. It's more easy. And we see that the size parameter also influence the early reflection. Even perhaps this tune only the early reflection, and this second network, diffusion network, do the job of reverberating those early reflection. Okay, so it shows that it's less artificial with the spin, even at small amount. And more woody when the shape is around there. Okay, so now we can cut the early reflection and work on the diffuse. Okay, something like that. Okay, so now let's go on a second one. I will cut a bit of those high also. Okay, let's follow the list now. Reverb, now we got roar. Okay, so to work on this, I will take this copy of the bass on which I have removed a bit of the low frequencies. So raw is the multiband distortion, saturation, drive, any kind of driving capabilities in this. And those three bands can be in parallel, meaning one band for the low, one band for the mid, one for the high, and you can change the routing of this multiband. Okay, you can have also a single distortion or saturation effect. You can have them in serial, first stage of saturation, second stage of saturation, in parallel, so two saturation but not feeding each other. You have the little drawing that explain you also how it works. Multiband is its default state. Mid side, so you will have one distortion saturation for mid, one for side. Feedback is a special routing with the second saturation being a feedback loop. It is inspired by all this setting of feedback mode. This thing is too complete. There's too much. And you got the delay. Okay, so one direct signal and one delayed signal. And each of them can be set with several filtering or saturation. Okay, here we have also in this bottom box the blend, or in other cases, it's always the blend, in fact, between the two filters. When you are in multiband, it gives you the two crossover frequency between low, mid, and high. In parallel, it's another blend. In serial, surely a blend. And in single, no blend. That's normal. Okay, So we have the drive input with a little LED that should flash here. Okay, and it said that it's always good when it flashes because it means that it can drive a noise. Okay. Okay, so this tone, let's try it on the drum because we have also some high frequency on drums. And we will paste it before the drum bus. That way the drum bus will retain everything because there's a kind of limiter in this drum bus. And let's focus on drum. Okay, so this is a tone for the input stage. Okay, so this sends an inverted signal of the input filter to attenuate or to equilibrate when you move that tone knob. Let's try. Let's say it's a kind of leveler. They explain on the left side exactly how it works. Attenuate before the shaper, prevent high frequency from distorting, negative value prevent low frequency. Okay, so it's a kind of security. Let's say if you have unstable input signal, you will leave it. You will click it to be yellow. Okay, that way it will avoid some saturation in high or low frequencies. Okay, this one. Okay, so this tone knob sending the high frequency in this side and low frequency on this side. This little box will define the center frequency of this tone switch, this tone knob. Okay, so for example, if I set it to 500 Hertz, the mid position is 500. So you can change that depending on which frequency you want to sweep with this knob to find the sweet spot. Okay. So after that, we will work on a single routing for now. That way we will discover each of those parts, meaning when we will understand one stage in this saturation, we will understand our work, the several band or split section. I will continue to describe completely and come back to some example. Okay, so we have here in each stage of saturation the amount of drive, okay, illustrated by this. The bias, which introduce DC offset and will slightly change the shape of the saturation. You see, if I saturate here, when I move the bias, you will see the center section moving. Okay, meaning that it's not equally sent in the negative and the positive portion of the signal. Okay, create a disbalance in it. Sometimes will bring some other harmonic we don't have when it's perfectly in the middle. Okay. Introduce a DC offset, which is useful for producing asymmetrical clipping. So what I was saying is called technically asymmetrical clipping. In the middle is symmetrical clipping, and all other position is asymmetrical. Okay, after it we have a filter, by default set to low pass and post. We can make it pre-distortion also. And here we have a whole bank of filter, low pass, band pass, notch, etc. Morph, comb, resampling and dispersion as some special filters inspired by other brand of plugin, but I know dispersion is good to play with the phase of the sub frequency and make it them appear more loud, or yes, or more amazing. We can say sampling is surely a kind of digital filter which emulate at the end the downsampling of the signal. Okay, so this was for the filter types. We can also switch off the filter completely if we don't need it. And on the distortion section, we have, depending on what we will choose, different parameters. Okay, so we have the soft sine. If you need the hard clipper, if you don't have some hard clipper, you will take digital clipping. This is 100 hard clipping, so this can be interesting for drums, for example. Okay, because it is said that very short transient, even if they are loud, you can cut them with a hard clipper without hearing the digital distortion occurring by clipping it. Okay, when you see digital clipping, it's most of the time hard clipping. And this amount knob is really the, let's say, input gain for this stage and this type of filter. So let's play a little with it, set it as a high pass. Okay, so after that we have a feedback mode. So this saturation can be feedbacked into itself with care. You have to be very careful, in fact. But yeah, let's just try what we can do with this. So we can have time sync to the BPM of the track, triplet, dotted, and note, meaning it will give us a note to choose, and this note will be the rate of the delay that feedback. To explain this quickly, when you set it to time, when you have some short time delay between the input, the dry signal and the delayed signal, let's hear if we hear it clear. Let's set a bit of amount. Okay, you hear that phasey sound that appear with this feedback loop. When I set it to short time, we will have a high frequency, and the more I go into longer time in milliseconds, and the more low is this phasing effect. Listen. Okay, and this occurs below 10 ms. So the note function use this ability of a delayed signal, and they tune it, meaning they took this portion, just this portion from 0 to 10 ms, and they graduated the notes for it. And that parameter will work in the opposite side, meaning on the left it will be more low notes, and on the right will be more high notes. But this can be interesting because it can really fit to the original note of your song. So for example, let's look quickly in this bass line. What is fundamental note? So it seems to be in G most of the time. Just try it in G. On the drum, of course. So we can invert the phase of this feedback signal. Of course, I just explained this feedback box, but I didn't set some saturation in it. Okay, let's go back to soft sine. Yes, around this is great. Okay, so let's continue. In this here, we reverse the phase or the polarity of the signal. So this is something you will use if you want it to sound more flangy. And the second one, when on, this ensures that the feedback is silenced once no signal is detected at the input of the device. Okay, so let it switch on most of the time. It's a security. Okay, to avoid the feedback to continue where there's no signal at the input. If you know what you are doing, you are experimenting, you can remove it and play with it. Really, I'm using one of the mode of one of the possibility, but there's many. Just to tell you, in this saturation effect, or like even a multi-effect, there's this feedback loop. And to end this feedback section, we have a bandpass filter, I guess. Okay, so let's bypass that. And at the end of the machine, we have something called compress, define the amount of main bus compression. So this is a one knob compression, and this little LED surely indicates us when it's actually compressing. Okay, below that we have activate the activation for high pass filter for the analysis signal used by the compressor. Okay, so this will cut the low frequency from the triggering pass of that compressor. Okay, so if your signal is full of low frequency or even very sub bass and things like that, but you want it to be triggered by more transient sound like snare or whatever, you will engage it. By default, it's on. Okay. Then we have an output level with another clip LED and a dry wet. Okay, so this was for the start. Episode 2. Now, what I didn't open here is called modulation. Let's open the modulation. So when we open modulation, it shows us just one of the LFO, but we can click on a second LFO, on an envelope, and on a noise modulator, meaning as the LFO would modulate one of those parameters, some random noise, different random noise like simple wandering noise, sample and hold, brown noise. All this can be sync or not sync to the tempo. So these are the modulation source, meaning we have 4 modulation source that we can configure to link to any of those parameters. And we will link those modulation to any of those parameters with the matrix. Okay. So for the moment, we have the latest parameter selected, and it was feedback note. Okay, if I select another, you will see directly the parameter you select will be shown at the first line here. Because for the moment, we don't send anything to any target, okay? So no matter which one I will take, any of the parameters out of those lists, but any of the parameters can be modulated. And this is here the whole power of this plugin, okay? I'm just clicking everywhere to see if really everything can be automated. Not the compression, but the output, yes, the dry wet also, and most other, the amount. So every list box will not be automated, but any other parameter can be automated. Okay, so let's imagine we have by default 3 band. Okay, low, mid, high, and we will try to process them differently on each band. And the last thing I can say also with it, if you click on this up arrow here, boom, we have the raw in big screen, meaning each of the engine, okay, all the modulation in one take. You have the envelope follower that we will set. This little headphone is to monitor what actually the envelope follower is recognizing. Yes, this is the word. And yes, so, and you have the modulation section for each. Let me just look for what. Okay, so the organized modulation section. We have all the control from the input section, all the control for the low filter, meaning this first yellow filter, all the controls for the mid filter, so that's one, all the control for the high filter. So of course, if you select another type of filter, let's say in serial, it will show you the filter one and the second one and not the third one. Okay, so it will depend, the display of the matrix will depend on which mode is selected at the input. Okay, and we have all the automation for the feedback section and the output section. So in one look, you have access to all parameters. So really, I think this shows the power of this machine, and don't be fooled by the fact of thinking that because you are making some reggae or dub of whatever, sometimes sweet music, you don't need saturation, because in this digital world, with no more warmth, but we are not educated to do some warm song. So what we will do is use saturation in small amount to emulate this warmth and things like that. So let this music play for a while. I'm back in 45 seconds and we will test this roar. Okay, so for now, I described um, all the abilities of this. Of course, if you want to go into the bibliothèque, library of presets from Ableton, there's a whole lot, and this is how you will discover the several things you can do with it. As I was saying, saturation be used to add some tape warmth or like a sound less rich in high frequency but rich in mid harmonics. We can see in the preset we have the VHS tape, the tape saturation, and several soft saturation that can be useful. We got also a rough dub echo. We will demonstrate this after. Yeah, so we can really do a lot of things. So the titles of the presets will tell you exactly what it is meant to. Okay. So guitar, glitch, drum. There's really a lot of presets, and you have all the basic presets, which will show you some basic setting in different mode. We see here basic parallel, basic multiband, mid-side, basic feedback, basic aux, etc. So let's go and tweak this in multiband to our test on this drum bus. I wanted to see if we could bypass the other band, but apparently not. So first, let's open a default one. Okay, let's go on the mid. So here you can see some of the LEDs moving. I guess this is the input of the envelope follower. Okay, so another thing I didn't say, we can also trigger it from an external source. Okay, and this source can be any of the other tracks from the project, and we can mix that signal with the input signal. And we got also a MIDI input, meaning that you remember this feedback section. Okay, this feedback section can be controlled when in note mode like this, can be controlled by some MIDI input. Okay, so we can imagine here that we have a MIDI bassline, and we will make a copy of the MIDI bassline and use those notes and we will send those notes to the raw, and the raw will tune note by note coming in from the bass, will tune this feedback mode. So this can be very interesting. In my case here, I don't have some MIDI bass, so I will not demonstrate, but yes, don't miss this very important external sidechain section. Okay, so let's set quickly our envelope follower. So I reduce the release, that way the envelope follower recognizes each of the peak of my drums. Okay, and from now I have some saturation on each of those. Okay, what I could do is... Okay, so that one is pretty obvious. So we will try now to simply use the matrix and modulate some of those parameters with the envelope or one of the LFO. We will try first the envelope. And what can I take shaper amount to exactly? And let's make something audible. What can I take? Shards? Okay, so it seems pretty special. Let me just double check. Okay, so apparently if I go into the positive section, nothing occurs. Okay, let's set it now to 50%. So it's like working the opposite way. When I go into the negative portion, this will make more saturation. It's more obvious to 100. Let's try again. Let's double check this envelope with threshold gain. Okay. Okay, now let's try with the same envelope to modulate the input drive or the tone. Let's go for the tone. So in a negative value, this means each time there's a peak crossing that threshold, it will reduce the parameter. And in positive, it will add more value. Okay, now let's take a LFO, and where will we put this LFO? On the filter cutoff, which will be obvious for sure. Okay, and what I will do is do the same on that. -50 on the I band. Okay, that way it's obvious. And now that the LFO1 is sending its signal to filter 2 and filter 3, I will go in the mode section, LFO1, and tune its speed and several things here. Okay, so this is simple as that. What can we do else? Perhaps bring the amount of this. So let's try to modulate this with the noise. Let's go for the noise. And why not modulating the time with LFO1? Okay, and in the big screen, we see all of those modulation in one site, as I was saying earlier, and we can modify or fine-tune everything here. Okay, so that's all for the explanation of RAW. Now I will just hot swap some presets here, and we will hear what it gives. So let's go back to default RAW. And let's try some presets. So the hot swap button is here, you click on it, it opens the RAW, and just have to double click each of them. Bad aux is funny because when it happens on the desk, no, it's a misery. Thank you for the regime, thank you. This one is interesting. Okay, let's follow. So a few of them, like that one lo-fi sampler, is interesting. All of them are interesting, in fact, for different style of effect. But yes, it's just to give you like an overview of the different sounding of this unit. This one is beautiful, so. So I will leave it on that tape saturation. Okay, now let's go on the next effect. And the next effect is saturator. It will seem simple now to talk about saturator, because saturator is like just one engine, simplified, and just one engine of the raw unit. Okay, so the raw unit came later, far later than the saturator. So saturator is simple. You recognize this little window of the clipping engine. We can open the saturator and change the color of the saturation when this is switched on. Amount low, let me check. Adjust the amount of saturation applied to low frequencies. Negative value, reduce the overall saturation applied to lows. Okay, while positive value. Okay, you will minimize the saturation of the low frequency quickly with this. Okay, and if you want for the high, it will be on this side. Okay. Yes. So below it, you have the input, the drive. This corresponds in the raw section to this, the drive input. Okay. You can select just 3 of them here, meaning no clip at all, one soft clip or one hard clipping. And I guess this clipping is after the main engine. Okay. So the main engine is figured out by this, and this will modify slightly the original shape to make it clip or hard clip. Okay, so this is one of the tip. If you need a hard clipper on drums or things like that, you will use a hard clipping here. Okay, and several. Not all are the same than in raw, but some of them are similar. You have a bass shaper specialized for bass. Okay, the output signal the dry wet, and here the way to modify the wave shape. When we take the wave shaper, we can decide ourselves how the sound will be saturated by moving some of the parameters here. Okay, so let's try it on a simple bass. First, I will remove all this. Analog clip, hard clip. This one is on my master to avoid clipping. And let's go on this copy of bass. and set a saturator on it. And let's try the wave shaper directly. I already removed the bass frequency from it. And I can also reduce, as it is said, the impact of the low frequencies here. Okay, and when you are on another preset than wave shaper, all of those parameters are not active. Okay, let's try something else. The bass shaper with the bass inside. Okay. So we will not make all the tour, but as for the raw, you have several presets that will guide you through the different possibilities of it. What I can recommend is just open it, leave it as it is without moving any parameters, but add some drive and reduce the output. It will make your sound thicker. And you can also use this as a art clipper, as I was saying, for drums and all very transient attack sound. Okay. Okay, let's go on the next effect now. So the next effect is called shaper, and shaper is in fact like a LFO, meaning that you will have a curve that repeats itself, and this curve you can map it to 1 or even 8 different parameters. Okay, and what is interesting in it, I don't find it very practical to draw, to be honest, but it's drawable, but not the most practical. But yeah, what I love in it is this manual mode. Okay, so with this manual mode, we can draw any of the shape we want here. So let's change what is displayed. Okay, for example, that shape. And when you click on manual mode, you can map this to one of your controller, physical controller, and then go through the shape, okay, by hand. So this can be interesting. For example, if you want to map it to select some parameters, there's too much here. So let's just open another effect. Let's say that one, saturator. And let's say what we want to modulate with this will be the selection of the clip. Is it yes? So we can modulate this. So what I will do, is first map this to this parameter. Mapping unsuccessful. The selected parameter does not support this operation. Okay, so this will not be easy. Will it work with that? Okay, you don't want for this also. So no matter, let's map this dry wet. And for example, if you want to go by hand, perhaps we can reset all this. Okay, snap to the grid. Let's say we want something like that. Okay. Let's drop that here. How can I remove it? Yes, with Shift and something like this. Yes, kind of scale. Okay, so if I leave it on loop, the LFO, as you see, will move this according to the shape I draw. Okay, let's make it slower. That way we see what is occurring. Okay, if I set it on one shot, it will take this draw of the shaper as an envelope, meaning it will be triggered just when it receives some signal. Okay. And I guess it should receive something like a MIDI note or something like that. Shape trigger mode loop one shot manual. They don't say more about that. Okay, so in loop it will do the same in loop. And in manual we will have the possibility during the mix of setting this parameter to any of the previous setting. So this can be interesting when you want to go to some step of frequency in a filter. For example, you just want 4 main frequency when you turn your knob. So you will use this shaper to do that. All other demonstration about how to route it to a lot of destination, the difference between map and mod, all this have been explained in the episode 2 or 3, in which I talk about envelope and LFO. So if you don't know it well, just go into the previous episode of Ableton stock plugin. I explained this in detail. Okay. What I can say to you quickly now is that when you are in a remote, whatever you will draw here, turn in loop or manual, will take over the original position, the defined position of a knob. Okay, meaning it will take it back to 100% minus 100%. Compared to the mod way of mapping, the mod way of mapping will keep in memory your original position and will modulate with this curve with this position as a centered position. Okay, so you will not lose the tuning of your other plugin. Okay, that was all for Shaper. Also for LFO, I also post a 10-minute video that I cut from the long live I did. And so you can find quickly in that LFO tutorial the way you can also map the shaper. So now let's go on a next effect, and the next one is called shifter. And shifter is a kind of pitch shifter. Let's play with it before the saturation. It can be 3 different things. The shifter can be a pitch shifter, so changing the pitch of the source. We are on the drum. Okay, so this is where we will tune the pitch. We can have the fine tune. The wide will add a spread into semitone, like a unison effect. Okay, and the parameter window below this is the audio sample window that will be used to be pitched. Here it is saying to us we have some 80 millisecond windows, and our input signal is sliced in many 80 millisecond pack or slice, and those slices are pitched one by one of this value. The more you will take some wide window, and the more the quality of the sound will be clean, but with a delay. When the window is too small, it's more phases and pitch. We have the input tone also, and we can also add a delay. And a feedback, so this thing can be also pitch delay. So let's take 2 semitone, something like, I don't know, this. So apart from the fact it can be a pitch effect, a frequency shifter, or a ring modulator, this can be also a very, very great pitch delay. Okay. Okay, so this is for the input section. Let's switch off the delay for now. Okay, on the second section, we have the LFO with the rate, amount of the LFO, the shape of this LFO. So sometimes they draw the little shape, and sometimes they name the shape, sine, triangle, etc. So you get the idea. It will modulate the speed, set the original speed. Before I go further, this effect also got a MIDI input. As it is a pitch effect, it means that it can receive some copy of your bass partition or melodic partition, and it will send exactly the right pitch to that machine. Where you can use it, for example, if you have some pads and you want to add that little pitch effect with a dry wet, and you want the notes from that pitch be commanded by another instrument than the pad themselves. So you will use the MIDI input, select the MIDI input of the other instrument, etc., etc. Okay, so something to discover also. More power, even more power. Okay, let's come back to that LFO. The LFO, we can choose the shape. We can change the shape, chosen shape. Here we can see a triangle becoming a rise sawtooth or a fall sawtooth. And the spin, default spin, okay, set to 0, can be set also to phase, and now you have a stereo pitch shifter. And you see that all this will be useful only if there's any amount of LFO. Okay, so in addition to the LFO, we have an envelope follower. So In this effect, every little section are small but powerful, like this feedback section of the roar. But yeah, so the envelope follower will correspond, if you want a visualization, to this. Okay, look at this window on the right. Okay, this window recognizing the shape of the drum. Okay, so in the shifter, this little box will recognize it. Don't show you the shape, but it will recognize it when you switch it on. Okay, and you can add some amount of variation of pitch depending on the input signal here, the drums. So it can be in positive or negative amount, meaning in negative amount, each time the threshold is crossed by the input signal, envelope follower, the pitch in this will go down. And I can do the opposite also. So a simplified envelope follower, but very useful. Okay, I guess I make a quick tour of it. Now, this was one effect, the pitch. Here we can change the mode of that effect and bringing it to a frequency shifter, which behaves differently. The pitch will be set with semitones and cents of tone, and the frequency shifter is really frequency not quantized to semitone, but really all frequencies can be used. And as you can hear, it has a totally different sound. So this is one of the tools used often to tune drums, or most of the time used on drum. It can be used on other type of sound, but as you can see, it brings some overtones that are sometimes not in the right scale. But yeah, many use for it. So as you can hear, very, very interesting. Okay, what can I say else? For all other parameters, this is the same: LFO, duty cycle, phase, spin. Let's try some different. Okay, and yes, experiment with this, only this. And the third one is a ring modulator. So this is another way of modulating the pitch or create some harmonics. And this work like a very, very fast LFO on the level, on the gain of a source, okay? But it is called amplitude modulation, AM, amplitude modulation. So a ring modulator is amplitude modulation, but very, very speed, which will change the sound of it. Let's disengage the envelope follower. And what could be great is to, in fact, it's already modulating the chords. Okay, like this. Okay, so very great for some space sounds also. And when you are in ring modulator mode, you can have also a drive output. Okay, to finish on that one, let's just to log a bit, let's just try some of Ableton presets on that drum. Ring modulators are great, but even better with a modulation to avoid this fixed sound when we don't need it. You will use some fixed ring modulator when you use this on a single source like a snare or a percussion. But when you are on some group effects like this, bring some LFO. Okay, so shifter, another mad effect. After shifter, we have spectral, the spectral section, which are very new. I don't know them, but apparently this will work on the spectral analyzer. It will analyze the frequency and gain in each frequency and make an effect based on what it recognizes in it. So we have 4 of them. They are pretty recent in the Ableton ecosystem. So let's try the first one. And just play a bit of music for a second. So, spectral blur. Let's mute everyone but the drums. Set the effect to dry only and let's see. Okay, so that window is recognizing the signal. This is called apparently a spectroscope. We can set it on the output or the input. Okay, so those two frequencies you can see here in the spectroscope that it will remove the high frequency here and remove the low. There's a kind of delay in it also. And residual is some non-blurred signal. Okay, so kind of freeze. So let's say that spectral blur is really something to, as you can do with an image, to blur the signal, to make it more blurry. So a dry wet and the wet gain. Let's see if it got some presets. We will try some presets. You get the idea. It will take the frequency component of the signal and generate like a kind of tail to it. Let's try some presets. And apparently when I read the title of the presets, this seems to be used most of the time for some room emulation. We see Bandeco, Blue Room. It recalled me the Blue Rooms of Saqqara. Dark Room. Okay, let's continue. Spectral Ambience. And this last little box is a delay compensation. So a bit experimental. Yes, I would use it more like a room verb. What I don't like in it is this kind of... yes, I would use it without this residual. Okay. Okay, now let's go for another one. We stay in the spectral style of thing, and this one is called spectral resonator. So in the previous episode, we saw the resonator effect from Ableton, and this one seems to be another resonator, but on the spectral signal more than on frequency. When I say spectral, it's apparently it will use a different spectroscope is a different way to represent the frequency. Very, very, very in detail. Each frequency and each gain in each frequency. And in all this spectral section, this is the source signal that will modulate the effect. So quickly we see that this one, like the resonator, have the possibility to be audio input, meaning internal for the resonator, meaning what will trigger the note of the resonator, or use the MIDI input with the MIDI source and several MIDI parameters to set. Okay. After it, let's Okay, we can set a frequency. We can decay that frequency. Can damp it. And apparently we can select also a note instead of a frequency, which is very useful. Yes, very interesting. I found it far more interesting than the spectral blur. The name of the parameters talk for themselves. Okay, so for this first section, and after it we have a different mode apparently set to none by default. So let's continue here. We can collapse this. It resembles a bit to a vocoder also. We can have many voices of unison. Yes, no, this thing is powerful. And a dry wet. Let's quickly try it on the bass. Yes, not the best place to be tested, but it was for the test. Let's go back on drums. And let's try to change those modes. Yes, very interesting. Okay, so it's a crossroad between modulation effect and pitch effect. But yeah, sounds very different than the shifter we see earlier. Okay, let's see quickly some presets. Yes, definitely a great one. And harmonics will define if the signal is recognized in the finest way, meaning with a lot of frequency bands, or really a few. This is why when I'm on one, we barely hear something. And the more I crank up this parameter, and the more it have more harmonics. Okay, let's go. Drum Challenger. Yes, definitely interesting, that spectral resonator. Yes, definitely try it on whatever sources but the bass. After that, we have the spectral time. So yes, spectral time will be the same concept of spectral recognition and with a delay, I guess. Okay, so we have a freezer at first and then a delay, and the parameter are self-explanatory. The way we will graduate the time parameter, the stereo, zero stereo, maximum stereo, and the mix of that delay signal. Okay, at the end we can set the freeze before the delay or the delay before the freeze. And a dry wet. An input send, because sometime in some settings it will need less signal at the input. Okay, and now let's see for some presets. Okay, so pretty far from the conventional effect. Yeah, very interesting. Everything that will bring a new sound, a new type of sound, a new texture of sound will be interesting. So spectral time. Okay, so in the between the blur, resonance, and time, really, resonator and time deserve you to stop by and discover it. After it, we have the spectrum analyzer. So this thing seems a bit esoterical at first, but really you will you will use it more and more. So it will give you the frequency response of, I didn't know that it takes all the screen like this, but yeah. Okay, so you have the frequency spectrum, and as you can do in EQ8, when you hover your mouse over the frequency, at the bottom left corner here, you have this little box that will indicate you which is the frequency, at which note it corresponds to, and how many dB power level at this frequency. So let's imagine I want to know the exact level and frequency where my kick hits the more. So I set my mouse here, and from here I know I'm at 60 Hertz, and the power in this region is minus 21.7. So not just for some numbers and all, it was just to explain you how to read this graphic. By default, those parameters are different. I don't know how I can set it back to its original state. But yeah, you can have it like every time recalibrating its window. Okay, here I set it for it to not recalibrate its window, meaning that my bottom minus 108 is always at the same place. I know that there's some mode where all this, even the graduation, will move. So you can have also a semitone display. Okay, it will display the notes. Each square is a note. Okay. Logarithmic and linear. Refresh will be the window of audio use. You see, short value will refresh instantly, and longer value will take more time to refresh. And you can set several size of blocks. The more you will take some wide or big blocks, and the more the curve will be smooth to read. Okay, you can monitor only the left, only the right, or left and right. And yeah, so this can be useful for example, when I don't know in which frequency is a drum or the lowest note of a chord, because we have a tuner, we will see the tuner just after, but this tuner don't recognize chords, it's only recognize note by note. So if I have a chord, I just have to look in that spectrum, and I look for the lowest note of that sound, and generally the lowest note will be the fundamental note, if that chord is not reversed, of course. But this can be a good way to know on which notes are your percussion, if you want to retune them slightly. For example, sometimes your percussion right on the key of the track will be really more effective. So yes, it seems not useful at first, but believe me, you will find it very useful the more you open it. Okay, and what I was looking for, this auto mode normally is set to auto, and this is where everything is moving here. Look at it. Okay, so it will constantly recalibrate and show you the upper window of the whole graph, depending on the level. Okay, so for me it's not practical to have this ruler moving always. So I prefer to have it as a range. That way, 0 minus 120. Okay, so spectrum, very interesting. So after spectrum, we have the tuner, a pretty simple tuner. Let's set it on the bass. So I will use the tuner or to tune my instrument or to verify in an old project I'm taking back to recall the fundamental of the bass. So you have an average display or a tuner display. Okay, and you can have it in hertz or semitone or cents. Meaning when you will be off key, it will tell you in terms of cent of tone, meaning the same value as the note plus or something cent of tone, or it will tell you in hertz the note and how far you are from the note in hertz. And you can change the reference tuning in between 410 to 480. So very interesting. So after it, we are coming closer to the end of that one. I knew it would be the last episode for the effect presentation. Thank you all who follow. I hope this is interesting for you. The next tutorial will come. I will come back on some composition and some composition. I wanted to do a series about the MIDI effects, but I think next live video will be about 1 or 2 composition in a reggae dub style, and in those compositions we will use a lot of the MIDI effects. That way you will see a rhythm in the making and how to use those MIDI effects. Let's go on the next effect. Stock plugin from Ableton. It is called Utility, a simple thing. Give me 20 seconds. So utility is well named, a simple utility. You can, let's see the left column. So you can reverse the phase of your signal. So you will use utility when you need to reverse the phase of the signal. For example, after a short time delay, very short ringy delay, to reverse the phase of that delay will react better and give you more a chorus or flanging effect than not reversing the signal of your delay line. This is why the phase reverse switch are most of the time on those effects like flanger, delay, choruses, etc. Okay, below in this box you can leave it in stereo or choose that utility will filter the signal to have only the left signal or the right signal, or it can swap your stereo, meaning that the new left channel is the ancient right channel and the new right channel is the ancient left channel. Okay, after it we have a width which will increase the width of a stereo signal or reduce it. We can set any source in mono. Okay, and we can mono only the bass. And with this little headphone, we will listen how much of that bass is monoized. So interesting. After some drum, after everything, you need to reset the low frequency to mono. Okay. Before going on the next column, know that you can right click width, and this knob will become a mid-side knob, having all the mono and mid signal on the side, and only the side on the other side. Okay. And here we have barely some stereo on the reverb of the snare, but this is the only thing. Okay, meaning that on some stereo signal, let's try for example on the piano, perhaps we will have more effect with that knob. No, my piano is also 100% mono. Okay, so let's finish this with the utility. Okay, control of the mono signal, and on the right we have a gain knob from -infinite to plus 35 dB, and a balance, a mute, and a DC offset corrector. It will sometime. What is DC offset? Quickly, sometime you will record, and the what should be in the middle at -infinite will be slightly upper or lower than the real -infinite. So DC offset, when you will switch it, will put back all the wave file for the -infinite, be back on the -infinite position. Okay? And a mute. So this thing is very useful for quick action to gain stage, meaning if you want to dub, most of the time you want to have your fader all at 0, because you know at this level this is the optimum level for this instrument. But if you don't need the level of this instrument being at 0, you will reduce. This is like the gain stage of your console for each track. Okay, so imagine for drum I want it maximum to -9. When my fader here it's at 0, so I will correct the level with an utility. Okay, so it can have many use. In a parallel rack, let's say I do an effect rack with a parallel effect. Just to give you a quick idea, and here we will set a vector delay. If it want to work, yes, we didn't see the vector delay yet. And what I can do is set this effect to 100% wet, have a dry signal. Okay, and use this utility I set before my effect to assign this gain knob. Okay, that gain knob I will calibrate it to be at maximum possible to 0 dB, not above. Okay, and I will call this gain knob send. That way I can automate whenever I want to send that sound to the effect. Okay. So, and many other use, but this is like a gain or mute button anywhere you need it in any chain, or monoize the signal. Brief utility. So in the list after utility, we have variation. So we will not talk about variation because this is another of the plugin from IFTA. I will not recommend you enough to go check his video. So IFTA is a plugin developer and musician, and he set what you could find in your pack, performance pack from IFTA, and it's a lot of little plugin or Max for Live to help you control the MIDI of your sets. And variation is something that can recall some of the variation of your set. So I will not go deep, but just to give you one example of what this man is developing. So don't forget to check his video on YouTube, IFTA. This one is called variation. So with this plugin on the channel, you will be able to take a snapshot of the state of your whole project or of or of the whole set when set is switched on, or on the particular track where you drop variation. So let's say on the set I move a lot of things like that. Okay, I move that, I will click new. I have my first variation. I will put them back in, up, and create new. I have a second variation. And I can do like this in the whole set with all parameter on all effect on one track or on all effect on all tracks. This is really a snapshot of the state of your project. So you can use it to set some A-B comparison of different balance of your track, or set it as some presets for very, very intricate and setting of all the effect on the chain brief. So let's say snapshot, this is a memorizer of different variation. Okay, and we can also open this, and perhaps I don't know for what it is. Let me just look. Toggle between excluding single parameter or whole parameters. Okay. I can have a little window for this variation, meaning if I change my track, it will stay open. So this is very interesting if you have many variation units in several tracks. Okay, device. Surely it will write here which device are concerned by any of the variation. Okay, so yes, a snapshot plugin, very, very, very useful. Okay, so this was for variation. Even if I didn't want to get into the IFTA plugin, it will need another episode. So now let's test. We are close to the end. We are on the vector delay. We have two vector things, vector delay and vector map. I just tried it earlier. I find it a bit esoteric. Let's just stay on drum. Wow. I guess they went really too far. Change, charge, mass. Apparently, it's electron logic that will rule a delay, because I see charge of an electron, mass, clip, warp. We can also save. No, this one is too complicated. What it is telling about. Randomize the particle's position change to freeze behavior with the onClick parameter. So let's reset it. No, they went too far for me now. Okay, so the number of voices are particles. Really not for me, definitely. Let's try some presets because yeah, this is too much. Time, glide, feedback, filter. Okay, so after we have a modulation matrix. I can't see it again where it is. No, really? No, let's go for the presets. Vector delay. We will do it with the hot swap. This one is interesting. Okay, so at least they give us the whole bank of presets, and this is very, very welcome because perhaps in a sound design environment, this effect can be interesting, but definitely for dub, no, this would be too complicated. And I think that those kind of effect, very elaborated effect as vector delay or spectral time resonators, they are not meant to be tweaked in real time. At least what I mean, not all of the parameter can be tweaked in real time. We will have some glitches and things. But yeah, very out of this world effect. I saw one name I wanted to try. Yes, moving fifths. Okay, so this is for some modulation, experimental modulation lovers. Okay, and we have the vector map. Wow, no, vector is too far for me. So okay, so this one could be interesting. This is the same concept of vector delay, but now we can map any of the parameter we want in Ableton, map this parameter and the behavior of that electron and all the setting will move all mapped parameters. So let's just try one or two. Okay, and we will reduce the maximum. Map it also to compress. So something to study. It become surprisingly more clear when we have to control a precise parameter with it. So vector map, the same vector philosophy, but to map this to any of the parameter and create some crazy random or randomized automation. Okay. And apparently we have this first map with the parameter moving, and we have also this a second map. I don't know in which case it display, but that second map will correspond to those direction. Okay. I can't remember where I set it earlier, but yeah, it's not important. So vector map, the vector philosophy, and we can map up to 8 parameters in remote or modulation mode. This one is, yes, more precious, more something to see than the vector delay. Okay, getting closer to the end. This one is called vinyl distortion, so it seems that it is here to emulate some vinyl sound. So how many crackle we want? The level of the crackle, the drive of the output. Okay, so quickly, tracing model, the tracing model section add an even harmonic distortion to the input signal. So for the novice, we will hear just saturation, but yeah, those we will hear with more precision, etc. We'll hear a specific harmonic distortion occurring with this switch on. And for the pinch, okay, so this one add an even harmonic distortion to the input signal, and the second one add some odd harmonics to the input signal. And of course, this is a kind of filter bell, which will filter frequencies that will be affected by the effect. Let's switch off the two. So for example, we can simply add some noise like this. If we don't want the vinyl emulation, but some crackle. Let's go through several presets. Okay, perhaps I don't use it, never use it, but it can be interesting to test, for example, a track in a vinyl emulation. For example, you set it on your master and to hear how it sounds. Of course, this is not the real sound of a vinyl, but it will give you you will hear how the frequencies of your master could be distorted on a bad quality vinyl press. Yes. So if I use it, I would use it as a drive, a specific drive, without the crackles. Okay, and the last effect of that list, Same way, so that effect can be very, very complicated. So we will go simple today with it. This is the vocoder. And so the vocoder is something to modulate a signal by another source. So generally, they would use some pads at the input of the vocoder and choose a vocal as a carrier. If I remember well, yes, we can take external and choose any track in our project. Okay, we will use it with the default mode today, because what you will hear occurring with the noise, you can imagine how it would behave with another source. Okay, so I have to remember where should be the voice and where should be the carrier. Let's just look. Select the source of the carrier. Signal noise uses an internal noise oscillator, external REVERB to select a routing point as a carrier. Modulator uses a modulator as carrier. Okay. Pitch tracking enable a monophonic oscillator that tracks the pitch of the modulators. Okay, so this machine will capture the pitch entering here as a carrier and use this pitch to modulate the actual sound. So I will first start with this on the drum with the noise oscillator, and after that we will try to vocode the bass from the drum, for example. So quickly you can have old school vocoder 20 band. This is the whole band 20K, and it can be cut in 4 minimum to 40 different bands. Okay, this is a kind of EQ because sometimes you will have to remove some of the harmonic to make it audible. Okay, let's set it like that. Let's say what I want is to add some noise to my hi-hat region. So here we will choose the number of bands, the range in frequency. Like a low cut and a high cut. The bandwidth of each band. Okay, if we have 4 bands, it will decide of the bandwidth of each of the bands. Okay, there's a gate, meaning that it will recognize only the louder signal coming in the vocoder or all the signal. Then a level of the original carrier noise. So after that, we can modify the way the noise is occurring, we can say, yeah. So the release, remove the attack, change the format. Make it stereo, mono, or LR. Okay, the format and a dry wet. So half of the time I use this only to add some noise to some snare or to some hi-hats, cymbals, or wherever I need to modulate by the noise. Okay, so let's try it on the bass. I don't have no voice into this project. Here we change the color of that noise. So we can add some subliminal bass like this, for example, and make it mono. Here you understand the use of this little pen for the frequency band. So I remove the very low from the noise modulation. So yes, quite interesting. Now let's try something else and put one on the drum, one vocoder on the drum. And instead of modulating the drums from the noise, input noise, or inside noise from the vocoder, we will use an external source. Okay, and choose the bass. So as I was saying, generally, this is 1 cent giving the tonality and the notes to a voice, making a robot voice. But everyone knows this kind of thing. I mean, everyone knows this type of effect. If you want a 100% vocoder tutorial of it, this unit exists since Ableton 8, I guess. So surely on YouTube you will find a very detailed tutorial to use the vocoder as a vocoder. Here I barely use vocoders for voice, but to make some special effect like this. For example, if I don't want the bump in the bass, I will cut the low frequencies. Okay, and let's try the opposite to end that long way tutorial. Let's set a vocoder on the bass and use the drums or the piano. Let's try with the piano as an external source. Piano will give us some chords, so okay. As you can see also, even if there's a bass behind the thing playing, the signal will only appear when there's some signal coming from the carrier source, here the skank piano. Let's set it to the maximum. So not the most eloquent test. Let's test with the drums. I've got something called drum bus normally. Boom, here. Okay. And of course, we don't got enough high frequency on that bass to have a more red health. Brief. For original vocoder tutorial, just check YouTube. This would be too much. I will just try to test some presets. As you can see, also the presets themselves are really based on special effect more than some vocoder. Of course, they will be pretty efficient also on voice. Yes, this one is powerful noise drum. It's like the drum has become a Simon's drum. I will keep that one. So I hope that this overview of the end of the list will inspire you to go dig into those effects in Ableton. This is the end of this series, the 5th episode and the end of this series about Ableton stock plugin. If you have any question or you see any topic you would like to see described in a video, don't hesitate to comment below. And we will see in the next live, I guess next week, not sure, but pretty sure. And this will be about composing something, talk less, because for 5 episodes of 3 hours, I was talking a lot. And yes, we will build some reggae drum and dub bass and skunk and everything and explore the MIDI effects while we do this. Okay, so thanks to everyone. Thank you also for sharing the link if you have some musician in your surrounding. Don't forget also to check my other music channel called JDI Elements on YouTube. And yeah, see you there at the end of the week for a live of the mixing on my second channel, JDI Elements. And we will see next week for the new tutorial from Shieldrum Records. Dubwise.